a nice that I don't want to spoil it. So just a sec as I figure everything out. Okay. Can you see it? Yes. Well, so the Stonewall uprising, some people might might be asking themselves, like, why did we choose the word uprising rather than riot or rebellion? And this is something that we'll be addressing in a few minutes. Okay. So first things first, I'd like to to challenge you to do a game with me. So, as you know, the Stonewall is pretty much related to the LGBTQIA plus movement, right? So I'll be showing you some flags that are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. And I would like to challenge you to know if you know what community those flags represent. Okay, I would like to start off by saying that this is a safe space for you to get things wrong, to ask whatever you would like to ask. So there's no judgment. I know that it's hard. It took me a while to memorize them all, but now I can proudly say that I know them by heart. So if you don't know, it's okay. You will know after today's session, right? So let's get started with the first one. Oopsie. Okay. So which flag is this? The non-binary flag, the bisexual flag, the lesbian flag, the trans flag, the gay flag, the asexual flag, or the intersex flag? You can send it on in the chat if you know the answer. Please try to interact. Take your guesses. The bi flag, maybe? Good guess. Anyone? Maybe two, the bisexual flag too, Bruna? I guess trans flag, Marcus, maybe non-binary. So I'm glad that I actually came up with this icebreaker. This is the trans flag, okay? The bisexual flag, it's similar in colors, but you see that it's not. But okay, what about this one? Which flag is this one? Yeah, Luis, the previous one was the trans flag. What about this one? Any clue? Have you ever seen it? 7. Very good, Bruno. This is the intersex flag. Okay. What about this one? Anyone? Oh, so we can cross out the trans flag and the intersex flag. So 4 and 7 are out. 2, yes. The bisexual flag, yay. Okay, and what about this one? I love the colors of this one. The color palette's like spot on. 6, the asexual flag. The intersex flag. No, the intersex flag was the one that was yellow with the purple circle in the center. Non-binary flag. This is the lesbian flag. Yes, exactly. This is the lesbian flag. What about this one? Yes, Bruna. Oh, I got it. See? Oh, I couldn't say that I'm so proudly right now. So this is the non-binary flag. I got it confused with the asexual flag because it's quite similar, the colors, you'll see. And then we've got this one is the gay flag. This is the gay flag. Oh God, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's the gay flag. Okay. And then we've got the asexual flag. You see why I got it confuse the non-binary one because the colors are pretty much similar, the purple and the grayish. Yeah, so I told you that this one is the gay flag because usually we consider the LGBT, the pride flag, the one that it's all the colors of the rainbow-ish, the gay flag, but actually that's what we call the pride flag. Okay, the gay flag specifically for gay men is this one. All right, even though we've got like all these different colors and different flags, you shouldn't bother that much like, oh my god, I don't know them all, because sometimes you see them in different places in LGBT pride parade, but yeah, it takes a while for us to quite wrap our heads around it. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you in the beginning, it was these are the things that we'll be talking about today. So first, we're going to talk about the history of the pride flag. So how did it came, how people would assemble it, what was the idea behind it. And then we're going to actually talk about the Stonewall uprising, my typo, okay? And then we're going to move on to Is the Fight Over? And then I'm going to give you some movie recommendations so that you can further learn about the topics that we'll be discussing today, okay? So first, the history of the pride flag. Does anyone know, or do you have a guess, when was the pride flag first assembled, put together? If you were to guess, would you say that it was like maybe in what decade? The 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? When would you say that the pride flag was first sewn together? Any clue? 90s? 70s? 70s? Yep, it was during the 70s. So before we actually talk about the pride flag, we need to talk about two interesting personalities. Harvey Milk. I'm not so sure if you have ever heard about Harvey Milk. But Harvey Milk, he was before at the moment that we are going to talk about. So 1974 actually is a very interesting moment because that's when Harvey Milk meets Gilbert Baker. Gilbert Baker is the designer, the artist that will actually come up with the pride flag, the original pride flag, the first pride flag. But he only did so because he met Harvey Milk, and because Harvey Milk at certain point challenged him and asked him to come up with a pride flag. But we'll get deeper into that in a moment. So here, actually, I would like to get it dive deep into Harvey Milk, or a little bit, I would say dive shallowly into Harvey Milk's history and story, okay? There is a movie about him, Juliana, and actually I'm gonna recommend it in a few seconds or minutes. Yes, it's a great movie. So Harvey Milk, for those of you who do not know him, he's a former politician in the United States, and actually he was the first openly gay politician to assume a position in the United States, more specifically in San Francisco. And yeah, so he was an advocate for LGBT rights and so on, okay? So in 1974, that's when they met. And sorry, in 1977, he won the position of 74. 1977, he got the position of secretary in San Francisco City Hall. After running and after a lot of different hurdles, he was able to actually get enough votes so that he became a secretary of the Castro neighborhood. So actually in the United States, they have a very different types of different hierarchies in terms of politics, the way that we do in Brazil. So he was a very influential person within the city hall, and he would help not only like put some bills forward, but he would also try to make LGBT rights more, how can I say, more visible and more interesting to other politicians, okay? So this is one of the things that he would say, like the only thing they have to look forward to is hope. When he mentions they, he's talking about the LGBT community, and you have to give them hope. So as soon as he got into his political position, he started talking to Gilbert, and he told Gilbert that he would like Gilbert to come up with a flag or a more interesting or maybe a symbol that could unify and actually show to the world the importance and the strength of the LGBT community. So he went to Gilbert because Gilbert, he was he was an artist, but he was also a fashion designer. So he came up with the idea of actually doing a pride flag. Because early in the beginnings and early in the 70s, what gay people, whenever they were marching or whenever they were expressing themselves, sometimes they would use the pink upside down triangle to represent the gay community. And they were doing that in honor of the gay people, the LGBT people that were murdered during the Holocaust, right? So after winning the election, Milk challenged Gilbert Baker to come up with a symbol of pride for the gay community, a positive alternative to the pink triangle. The pink triangle, once used by Nazis to identify and persecute homosexuals, had been reclaimed in the 70s as a bold symbol of remembrance and action against persecution. It is still widely used, often alongside or superimposed upon the rainbow flag. Okay, so usually people used to use this, but Harvey was like, okay, I know that it's important, but I would like something that wouldn't actually remind people of such terrible times, right? So then he came up with an 8-stripe flag, actually. So this was our new revolution, a tribal, individualistic, and collective vision. It deserved a new symbol. So they could actually see that we were heading towards different times. So they put together these really big flags with 8 different colors in it when he first did it. And when he first did it, he dyed it everything by hand. Actually, does anyone want to say anything? So I think there's some microphones that are unmute. Okay. And then he died and he sewed everything by hand with the help of a friend of his, and then they were placed in San Francisco for a very short period of time. Then what happened? Oh, well, before that, these were the colors and what they actually mean. All right. So pink represented sex, red represented life, orange healing, yellow the sun, green nature, turquoise art and magic, blue serenity, and purple the spirit. So they actually had 8 colors in the flag. But then a terrible thing happened in 1978. Harvey Milk was killed. He was murdered in the same year or the following year that he was elected. Both him and the mayor of the city of San Francisco were murdered by a fellow deputy. So this fellow deputy once entered, killed Moscone, who was the mayor of San Francisco at the time, and then he went on and he killed Harvey Milk. After that happened, the LGBT community in San Francisco specifically, they got really, really mad and of course really sad. And then they started doing more protests. They started doing a lot of other things, especially after the trials that Dan White, who was the deputy who killed them, the assassin, the murderer, was actually first he was going to be convicted of, like, he was going to receive the capital punishment, death penalty, but then some other things happened that they actually allowed him not to face death penalty, and then people started rioting because of that as well in their own ways. So there's a movie about Milk's story, Milk's life, Milk's history, which I highly recommend, with Sean Penn. I'm not a huge fan of Sean Penn because he has had some pretty homophobic allegations and pretty homophobic statements lately. But the movie, it's really interesting to see not only Milk's influence in the LGBT community, but also what led to his death and how people dealt with that. Okay. So after Milk's death, what happened was that a lot of people started gathering and rioting and marching for gay rights, and they were in shock in that it happened to Harvey Milk because it was such a struggle to put him in such a position, and then out of a sudden he was murdered. So because of that, in the following years, a lot of people alongside Gilbert, they wanted to make the rainbow flag much more accessible, widespread. They wanted people to actually use the pride flag. So what happened was that when they started trying to do and trying to go to different factories and different places that they could actually come up with like a large batch of pride flags. They start running out of hot pink, so they actually decided to remove the color from the flag. And also because of another problem, they ended up, sorry, please, I'm gonna ask you to keep your microphones on mute. If you want to ask something, you could use the chat, okay? And then they also decided to end up taking out and changing the color of the indigo. They changed indigo to royal blue, okay? So we ended up having the pride flag that we know nowadays with 6 colors, with 6 stripes, all right? And then in 2021, Valentino Vecchieri, they came up with an intersex inclusive progress pride flag in 2021, because then it would, of course, they came up with the first pride flag in 78. So we are in 2023. So many things have changed, right? So in this one, here we've got Black and brown to represent people of color. We've got the inclusion of the trans flag in this triangle. And we also got the intersex flag represented here by the yellow and the purple arrow, the purple ring, okay? So this is one of the flags that you'll see whenever you go to any LGBTQIA plus pride parade, even though people still use the original one with the 6 stripes only, okay? Questions, comments so far? No? Okay, so let's take a look at the Stonewall uprising, okay? So first, the bar. So actually, the Stonewall Inn was one of the few gay bars in Greenwich Village in New York City, where patrons could dance and drew a diverse young clientele, as well as a small number of lesbians. Some patrons dressed in forms of drag, and there were also people who wore business attire or jeans and flannel shirts. So the thing was, Stonewall was one of the few bars that they had that they could actually go, and you will understand why in a minute, because New York City back then, that was around the 60s, was very different from what we know nowadays, of course, right? The United States had gone over prohibition of alcohol drinking for a long period of time, and of course, the years that followed that prohibition actually impaired a little bit the freedom and the way that people would interact with such a drink. So the Stonewall Inn was a bar that a lot of gay people used to go, but it was a little bit different in the way that it was arranged. So in the early 60s, while homosexuality was legal in the state of New York, establishments openly serving alcohol to gay customers were considered by the State Liquor Authority, SLA, to be disorderly houses or places where unlawful practice are habitually carried on by the public. The SLA refused to issue liquor license to many gay bars, and several popular establishments had licenses suspended or revoked for indecent conduct. Businesses that remained open were frequently raided by the police. So what happened? So in Stonewall, the thing was, they were very strict about these licenses. So the people that actually were able to sell alcohol. So what happened in New York at that time, especially gay bars, they usually the owners were mafia related people. So in the case of the Stonewall, they were part of the Genovese family, that they were an Italo-American mafia family, and they actually were the ones running the Stonewall. So because of that, what would they do? So the Stonewall was actually, they considered it a private club. So it wasn't a normal bar. So in order to try to dodge this whole legislation that they weren't actually able to sell drinks for gay people, the mafia people, they thought like, maybe we could make some money out of it, because LGBT people, they sure want to drink some alcohol, but they don't actually have a place to go. So what they started doing was they came up with a notebook, that whenever people would get inside the club, they would sign their names. In the case of the attendees of the or the goers, the Stonewall goers they were going to do, they actually came up with some pseudonyms. So they would put like Judy Garland, or they would put like some other people's names instead of their own names, because then they would come up with the idea, or they would say that actually it wasn't really a bar, it was a private club where people would get inside, they would pay for their own bottles and things like that. So they were actually able to sell the community, the sell community alcohol, right? So the thing was, it was pretty common for police to raid. What is to raid? To raid is when the police, they go somewhere and then they start entering, start checking if everything is normal, if everything is following the rules and so on, okay? But then what happened? So law enforcement would selectively arrest patrons and managers, impound the cash register and alcohol, and padlock the front door. Management typically bribed the police, mafia, and state liquor authority officials for protection. So they were tipped off in advance of an imminent raid and would sometimes turn up the lights to warn patrons to stop any open display of affection or slow dancing, which could risk arrest. So the thing was, it was a very complicated environment to be in, right? Because at any moment, both the mafia or the police could come in, and you don't know what would happen, right? So they would have like this code and all these things that they would be advised of, so that they could start properly behaving themselves. So then they would say things like that, like gay, prohibition, corrupts, cops, feeds mafia. So it was a very complicated place to be in. And actually, during these raids, there was another thing that they would use against the LGBT community, which was, back then, if the police stopped you and they counted, or if they checked the items of clothing that you were wearing, if you did not have at least, if I'm not mistaken, 3 pieces of clothing that were usually used for your assigned gender, you could get arrested by deviance of decency or something like that. So for example, if they see me and if I'm not wearing, for example, pants, a tie, and shoes, or something like that, if I'm only wearing like pants, but I'm not wearing a shirt, but I'm wearing a blouse or something like that, they could arrest me because I was under the minimum number of items of clothing. So that's one of the things that they would also do that was very violent towards the LGBT community. Okay. So what happened? So it was common for the police to come and raid Stonewall and all the other gay bars. But then one night, June 28th, 1969, they got fed up. They wouldn't like to receive that. Luis said, coincidentally, I watched an episode of Cold Case today that seems very much inspired by the whole situation, including the Italian mob, the raids, and the changing to gender-appropriate attires and forming men-women pairs. It's on Prime Video Season 1, Episode 7, if anyone's interested. Thank you, Luis. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to check it out. Thank you. Yes. And then one day they become tired of it, right? And then everything started from there. So the riot, rebellion, uprising. So what would be the most appropriate term to refer to the Stonewall movement event, I would say, right? So I'm going to play a video for you. And I think that the video will rightfully talk about it, okay? So it's a very short video, minute one in 16 minutes, that you can see some people that actually were part of the Stonewall uprising talking a little bit about their experience in there, okay? Tell me if you can hear it as soon as it starts.
It really should have been called Stonewall Uprising. They really were objecting to how they were being treated. That's more an uprising than a riot.
As much as I don't like to say it, there's a place for violence. Because if you don't have extremes, you don't get any moderation. And as awful as people might think that sounds, it's the way history has always worked.
I don't know if you remember the Joan Baez song, "It isn't nice to block the doorway, it isn't nice to go to jail." There are nicer ways to do it, but the nice ways always fail. For the first time, we weren't letting ourselves be carted off to jails. Gay people were actually fighting back, just the way people in the peace movement fought back.
Okay. Besides what the man said, I've also read in some other articles and in some other places that they usually prefer the term uprising because actually riots was the wording used by not only the press, but also the police officers to describe the Stonewall uprising so that they could somehow excuse their violence and the use of violence towards the community. Okay, so that's why I chose the term uprising and not actually riots. Okay, so the unusual reaction of the Stonewall's patrons spurred the crowd outside, which came to include a diverse segment of the local LGBT community, as well as other residents of the Greenwich village and visitors. Instead of dispersing, the angry crowd began to fight back as bar patrons were arrested, throwing beer cans and other objects at the police, who were forced back into the bar. A number of eyewitnesses have offered differing accounts, but as with almost any riot or spontaneous confrontation with the police, no one knows for certain what exactly sparked the confrontation or who threw the first punch or object. So actually, if you search for the Stonewall uprising on YouTube, you'll see that there are a lot of different people talking about who threw the first first brick or the first can, the first bottle, but there are no actual and factual information about it. No one really knows for sure. And it's also really interesting because there's this joke in New York City that if you meet anyone who's around the age of someone who could have participated into the Stonewall uprising, they would say that they were there, and they are going to say that they threw the first object toward the police. So there is this whole situation, right? So the Stonewall actually was this was the LGBT community fighting back not only police violence, but also somehow the mafia and this whole bribery scheme that would feed upon them, right? And then what ended up happening was that for the following 5-6 nights, the uprising kept going. So for the following 5 nights, they were still there, they were there, and the police would come and more people would join. there is not an estimated amount of people that actually participated, but some places they would say that there were 200 people in the first night. Some other places they will say that there were 600 and so on. But we can most definitely say that it did not stop there. Okay, there were no casualties. Of course, there were 9 people jailed in the first raid, and the following weeks you had like 13 in another night and 10 in another one. So it was basically the only incarceration of the patrons or the people that were protesting somehow. There were no casualties, no one was murdered, but it's not because of that it actually was something good, right? That it was violence all the way. So the thing was, so prior to the Stonewall uprising, the gay rights organization in the nation's major cities had a modest number of members. So before, because there's this discourse that everything started with the Stonewall, but actually the Stonewall was only able to happen because there were other things going on at the same time, and people were actually feeling a little bit more bold, and they actually took the chance and they risked their lives to actually go on to a bar, right? So the thing was, like, prior to that, there were some other situations, there were some other riots, there were some other police and LGBT community confrontations, but nothing took the same spotlight and the same power and fuel as the Stonewall. So that's why usually it's one of the most famous dates and place whenever we talk about the LGBTQIA plus history, right? So in the aftermath of Stonewall and in the years that followed, organizers of new LGBT civil rights organizations across the country and around the world drew hundreds of thousands of activists into the fight for equal rights. So actually in 1970, there was the first what we consider Pride Parade, the LGBTQIA plus Pride Parade. And then they would call Christopher Street Gay Liberation Day. So Christopher Street was the street that is the street that Stonewall Inn is located, because Stonewall Inn is still a gay bar and it's up and running. Of course, they have undergone some renovation, but it's a place that you can totally go have a beer, listen to some music, and you'll see like a sign, you'll see like a lot of different things in there regarding the whole event of the night of June 28th, 1969. Okay. And then from the 1970 on, it was an ongoing thing, the Pride Parade, and it grew stronger, stronger, and stronger. And I would say that happily we have here in Brazil, and we can proudly say that we have the biggest Pride Parade of the whole world. So in Brazil is the biggest one. Some people don't know that. They would say, sometimes they think that New York or San Francisco, they have like bigger Pride Parades, but no, it actually happens here in Brazil. Okay. And then I would like to, and also I would like to point out the fact that some people think that, why give it back the rainbow? Why is there such a thing as a Pride Parade? Why do people still talk about it? We're past that. We're light years ahead from 1969, right? And then I would like to show you some headlines and some things that I've seen for the past few months, and I would like you to decide it on your own, okay? So here we've got one from January 21st this year. So Republican legislators introduced new laws to crack down on drag shows. Bills in at least 8 states seek to restrict drag performances as part of a broader right-wing backlash against LGBTQ plus rights. So actually there is this whole movement, actually there is this organization called Drag Queen Story Hours. And there are a group of drag queens that they actually go to libraries, and sometimes they go to some schools and some events where they will read kids' stories, and they're going to talk about these stories. Nothing obscene, nothing sex related, They are all dressed in all different colors and drags a lot of attention, and it has been dragging a lot of different attention from the media, and of course, from the right-wing politicians as well. And then following some situations especially in Florida and in some other states in the United States, we have headlines such: fight or flight, transgender care bans leave families and doctors scrambling. Laws in 20 states have left the fate of clinics in doubt, and families with transgender children searching for medical care across state lines. This was July 6th, last month, right? And then we've got Florida board approves expansion of Don't Say Gay ban to all school grades. So approval of bill prohibiting discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity comes at the request of Governor Ron DeSantis. And then I would like to say, right, for example, according to this rule, if it was approved and it was here in São Paulo, I most probably wouldn't be able to be hosting this session tonight, right? Because how come you will talk about LGBT history without talking about what LGBT people are, right? And then there's another one. So teacher took his own life after 6 stalkers' vile campaign of homophobic abuse. And this is not new, and I imagine that you're not so unfamiliar with this type of headlines and topics, right? And then a few years ago, we also heard about a mass shooting in Colorado, right? So shooter in attack that killed 5 at Colorado Springs gay nightclub pleads guilty, gets life in prison. So apparently some people are doing some things to try to at least make lives a little bit safer for LGBT people, but this is an ongoing fight. This is an ongoing battle, right? And then I would like to wrap up by giving you some movie recommendations, right? So please write these names down because I've selected only the best of the best, okay? If you have already watched some of them, you can comment, send it in the chat, okay? So actually I paired most of them because I saw like something similar. So I chose like, and then I paired them up. For example, The Imitation Game and Carol, I think that they're somehow both a little bit nostalgic because they talk about if I'm not mistaken, the 30s and the other one, the 50s. So the Imitation Game it's usually set around the 30s or the 40s because it's related to the Second World War. So the Imitation Game is about Alan Turing. Alan Turing was the father of the computer. He was the person who actually came up with the first computer, and he actually helped England to be a few steps ahead of Germany when they were fighting the Second World War. And he ended up dying, sort of. And then the situation of his death is a little bit unknown, but he was undergoing some trial because he was gay. And then we've got Carol. Carol is a beautiful movie. It is, Leandro. And then we've got Carol with Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. And it's bisexual / lesbian love story about 2 women, and they meet at a toy store. Carol's Kate Blanchett is buying something, and Rooney is selling something, some toys, and then they fall in love, and you'll see the unfolding of their relationship. We've got Prayers for Bobby, which is a classic, especially whenever we talk about the relationship between parents and LGBT kids, right? Because the story of Prayers for Bobby is the story of a mother who was not willing and who couldn't accept her son, and then her son ends up dying. And then it's a lot about that. So a lot about religion, a lot about acceptance, a lot about mother, son, mother, queer kid sort of situation. It's an old movie. It's quite old, but people love it. I haven't had the chance to watch it, but all my friends recommended it, so that's why I'm recommending, okay? If you don't like, it's not on me. And then we've got, actually, in the same note, on the same note, we've got Boy Erased and the Miseducation of Cameron Post. Boy Erased actually is a movie about conversion therapy in the United States, which is something that is still going on, but it used to be a lot stronger, where people would send their kids to religious camps or religious treatment, where they say that they would be cured. So the movie kind of shows like the impacts, the mental state that people actually start getting into, and how bad it affects them, not only for their life but also for their family. And the Miseducation of Cameron Post, which is in the same lines of Boy Erased, but she's sent to a camp, and then she makes some friends, and she starts figuring her life out there in it. Lillian's gone. And then we've got Moonlight, which is an absurd, it's a perfect movie. It's really interesting, really beautiful, very subtle, very heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, about a kid, and we see how this kid evolves into adulthood, and the way that he lives his life by being both a gay and Black man. So it's really interesting, it's really beautiful. I'm not sure if it got an Oscar, but I'm pretty sure that it was nominated. And we've got Disobedience, which is a movie about two women who fall in love, and they are part of they are Jewish. So there's all the discussion around being Jewish and being queer, and how they actually navigate these two relationships, this relationship within like a very conservative Orthodox family and setting. Moonlight got Best Picture in the Oscars. Yes. Thank you, Leandro. It did. Thank you. And we've got, for me, one of my favorites, and one of the movies that if you could choose one, I would recommend this one, but I'm going to give you the biggest warning ever, because it's a very, very heartbreaking movie. It's very difficult to watch, but it's very important, and it's called The Normal Heart, and it will portray, and it will you will kind of understand a little bit better, not only the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the United States, how it started somehow, and the way that it only got bigger and bigger and as complicated as it got, partly because the government was not actually willing to look and wasn't really to look to the LGBT community and actually acknowledge their existence. So there was a lot of resistance within the government to actually understand that there is this community, or actually acknowledge it, so that something could be done. It's a very, very beautiful movie with A-list actors and actresses like Mark Ruffalo, Matt Bomer, Taylor Kitsch, Jim Parsons, Julia Roberts. So I would highly recommend you to watch The Normal Heart. If you've got HBO Max, it's there because it's an HBO production, and it is heartbreaking. I cannot, oh my God. But it's awesome. I highly recommend it. Okay. So that's it. Do you have any questions? We've got 9 more minutes. I would like to open this space for discussion. If we have anything to mention, to ask, anything. We've got a bunch of people here tonight, so please do. Have you heard about Stonewall before? Haven't you? Have you watched some of these movies? Have you not? No? Okay, no worries. Well, oh, so let's check. Someone sent something. You're welcome, Bruna. Oh, I've never heard of Streets of Philadelphia, Anita, actually. Oh, really, Danielle? I haven't heard of it. Anita, I'm gonna write it down. I'll check it out. Yeah, I really want to, but I haven't found it in any of the streaming services that I've got. Prayers for Bobby. Streets of Philadelphia. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions or if you would like some of the sources and things that I have actually read to prepare this presentation, feel free to email me and I'll gladly answer you with all the links and all the things that I have researched. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Daniele. Sorry. Thank you, Marcos. Thank you, Leticia. So thank you so much. Have a great week. Thank you.